Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
Good morning, Jan. Good morning, listeners. An early podcast recording here at the PROCON studio, leading the project controls conversation. Today we have a new use case and a very special one. As a Dutch citizen, we are very proud of the project. Jan van der Marel, Project Director of the Nuclear PALLAS Reactor. We're going to tell you more about what this actually is going to do, because they are still in the finalization of the design phase. Jan, we always have very clever people, and you are no exception to this. Master in physics and a master a couple of years later in business energy system. Why did you transform from general physics, with all the general physics, to a specific energy system? Is the passion of yours, or what's the idea about that?
You can say that it's a passion indeed. First, thanks for having me here, Paul. It's very good to be here in this nice place. I've been interested in physics all my life. Studied physics and also the nuclear aspects of it. The first years of my career, I also worked on nuclear projects on the installations that were then running in the Netherlands, Dodewaard and Borselen. Borselen is still running, and Dodewaard not anymore. Also worked in Germany for a year in nuclear projects, and then went more into the energy systems and the energy business. Both consultancy as well as project management. And I was really delighted to have the opportunity some 5 years ago to work for the PALLAS project.
In short, if we talk, I always say to my colleagues and my friends, I say we are building the PALLAS reactor. We are building the nuclear reactor in the Netherlands. Can you tell me a little bit more about the new PALLAS reactor you are responsible for?
I can do that. I think the best way to do that is to tell you first a bit about the current reactor that's standing in the dunes of Petten. The HFR, the high flux reactor. It was starting operating in, I think it was 61, so really quite a while ago. It's been used for all kind of research and development work. And over the last 20 years actually, it grew to the dominant supplier of medical isotopes worldwide. So at this moment, some 30%, a bit more even, of all isotopes that are used in medical applications around the world are coming from the PET reactor.
So it's not the energy nuclear reactor, but it's a medical nuclear reactor. It's building medical isotopes for, I think, X-rays and tumor radiation.
That's true. So that's really good to understand. It's not the typical nuclear reactor people are aware of to produce electricity, but this is really to do research, but mostly to produce medical isotopes. It's all because of that. It's a completely different type of reactor as well, and also the risks related. It's still nuclear. It's still, in that sense, a risky business, a risky process that you need to control very well. But it's not comparable to the power reactors. Because pressure and temperature inside the installation are way lower. But as said, the HFR is running since the 60s and is really reaching end of life. And we want to keep this dominant position in the Netherlands to produce these isotopes. And also at this moment, there's really a huge increase in the development of new isotopes that are really used to, you mentioned already, to treat cancer patients. So traditionally, it was mostly used for diagnostics, but now the transformation is really to isotopes that are used for therapeutic reasons.
And 1960 is a while ago. Did the technique around nuclear reactor, around the nuclear production of isotopes, change a lot, or is it the technology around it, or is it still the same principle?
The physical principle, of course, is the same. That hasn't changed.
No,
that hasn't changed. But you do see that the technology around it, of course, has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And in terms of safety and safety systems, so the HFR has been developing that. It's still a very high safety standard.
Yeah.
But now you have the chance to build a complete new reactor. Of course, you do things differently.
Yeah. And who has that idea? Because you said the Netherlands wants to keep that dominant position in this market. Is there a reason why the Dutch are so dominant in this, or is it just by accident? We got this.
I think historically it's by accident that we are in this situation. I think it's important to realize that it's not just a reactor. The supply chain of all the isotopes is very important.
Yeah.
You can imagine radioactive isotopes. Well, a little bit of physics.
You don't just mill them.
It decays. So the activity of the project goes down over time, depending on the isotope that goes faster or less fast. But typically, the supply chain to make sure that the isotopes are really quickly with the isotopes and with the hospitals and inside the patients is very important.
Okay.
And you also see that there are a number of companies around the reactor that have a close connection to the pharmaceutical industry and that can provide that quick supply chain. So it's not just that you can put this reactor anywhere. The position there is counting a lot.
And in Europe we have a lot of pharmaceutical companies who have in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, etc. And that's why the environment for this reactor is very good in the Netherlands. Good supply chain, good transportation means, etc. Okay, but then I think the PALLAS Reactor initiative started early 2003. I think the actual start of it's a foundation at the end. Who comes up with such an idea? Do you know that?
Yeah, it's the original company operating the HFR who initiated the idea because of the aging of the HFR to initiate the project to replace that reactor. So that has been developed 2003 onwards until 2010 somewhere. And then the decision was made by the government, actually, two decisions. First of all, they said it's better to take it separate from the energy organization because of all kind of historical liabilities in that organization. Because it's a very demanding and very big project, very difficult to handle for that organization. And also they want to take it apart or take it apart from the running organization. Because the ambition of private financing, to have this reactor privately financed, and then it's better to build a separate organization. So from end of 2013, beginning of 2014, the PALLAS Foundation was erected. And then it started as a dedicated independent organization, you could say.
And you have joined PALLAS 5 years ago. In what phase was you are the project director, so you're overall responsible for the project execution. It's a project, it's a program at the end. What stage was the project at that time?
Yeah, so the project was 2-3 years in development, and the organization has grown from a few individuals to some 25-30 people at that time. And some main suppliers around the organization have been contracted. So that's the owner's engineer that was then part of the team, and a party that's supporting us in the licensing process. Also, people that support us in setting up the project and the project controls. As joined, we have contracted, and we were then in the phase of contracting the main contract for the nuclear installation, the engineering as well as the erection, the realization of the nuclear installation.
And from a design or requirements perspective, the draft was there from a requirements perspective, because were the requirements very clear? We have this right now in patent, and we want the same or bigger or different technology, same principle. What was the status of the requirements that phase?
The requirements were clear but functional. So a rather high level, you could say. So really in terms of amount of output and quality of output. And of course, requirements around safety. And at the same time, also the business case was developed. So these were all the time basically linked to make sure that the business case and the production capability of the reactor were in sync.
Yeah, I want to talk about the business case because it changed, and I've reviewed the webinar about the market consultation. You're actually going to the market to get contractors on board who lay the bricks and the foundations, and actually it's coming out of the paper into the real world. You're going to the market. Let's talk about that a little bit later. The change of private financing to public financing has been made, or should have been made last couple of months. Also, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, due to the status where the cabinet is in the Netherlands right now, because they need to make a decision right now, and they. And I heard Ronnie from the webinar talk about it. You need to make the decision early next year to finalize this, and we're going for public money. This changes a lot in the project, I assume. One very important thing I captured from your status report, and we are here at the PROCON podcast, he said project controls. So 5 years ago, Jan van der Marel came on board, project director of PALLAS. It's such a big project. You started 2003. I think it should be commissioned early 2030, if I'm correct. It's a program of almost 30 years. How do you start? Where do you start on your schedule, for example, or your planning? I've watched the V model. We are very enthusiastic about the V model ourselves. Where do you start on a project this size?
A lot of questions at the same time, Paul. Where do I start? Well, I think it's good to realize that there was a reset of the project around 2013-14. So that's basically the new start of the project, you could say. When I joined.
And what do you mean with a reset?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, it was first developed within NRG, and then it really was reinitiated, you could say, as a initiative also to find the private financing. And at that time, also the requirements and the business requirements were made much more clear, and we're much more aligned with each other. So that was, we started basically from scratch with the PALLAS organization in 2013-14. Like you said, when I joined in 2016, we were in the process of hiring this consortium for the engineering and the realization. And at that time, there was at our side a small project organization, and well, like I always say, the development phase, especially when it's heavy in licensing, is close to impossible to schedule. These are so, especially the licensing process, are so complicated to really oversee all the links, to oversee all the durations of the legal periods in that licensing. So, but the licensing schedule was actually the main structure in the beginning. And we tried to. Is
that the hardest part? Because if I look at a nuclear reactor, I think, well, the physics is very difficult. You probably think different on that, but are you saying the licensing module actually develops the pace of this project because that's so difficult?
That's indeed my experience. That especially in the development phase, I've said many times physics is easy. It's very predictable, but and that's also true for designing a nuclear reactor. But there's so many authorities that need to be involved, so many stakeholders that need to be involved there. I learned so much about all kind of license structures and sequences to obtain license and how they interact with each other. So you could say that the most learning experience over the last 5 years has probably be the licensing.
You better could have a legal degree than a master degree in physics to run a project like this.
Maybe.
And are you talking to the Dutch government, European government? I think there's an international nuclear not government but regulatory body. How many different stakeholders approximately are there? How many different licenses? Because maybe not everybody knows where Ep10 is. Ep10 is 50 kilometers, 60 maybe north of Amsterdam. Yeah. It's in the middle of nature. It's in the dunes. There's a nature. The tulip fields are. You can see them on the air. Why there, or why are you making it so complex? Go to somewhere very remote where there are no dunes, where there's concrete. Does that make it very complex? More complex.
That adds to the complexity. You mentioned the nuclear environment. So there's a dedicated regulatory body for obtaining the nuclear licenses in the Netherlands. It's not that we need to involve European or international authorities there. Mm-hmm. It's more that the international authorities like the IAEA, they set also a requirements environment, which is then also applied by the Dutch regulator, but it's actually one regulator. Yep. And funny enough, that's not the most complicated process, the nuclear license process. So the conventional license process with nature licenses, you mentioned, indeed, we're in the middle of the nature area in the dunes. It has not been my decision, but in the 50s already, I think this area was dedicated for this research in energy and nuclear. And you see, I mentioned supply chain, and the supply chain is really a supply chain of ours, often in the isotope. So that's why it's very important to be on that site and to have the reactor there.
Yeah. Is it close to the airport or close to big
close
fields?
To facilities that take the next step in the processing of the isotope. So out of the reactor there comes irradiated material, and then first you go through a chemical process to make a solution in which the isotopes are in a liquid environment, and then the step after that is really going into the pharmaceutical. But these facilities to do that step are at that site. Yeah. So that's why it's very important to be there. Yep. And indeed, this adds to complexity. But I'm not so sure if that's really making a big difference. I think it's generally in the Netherlands to obtain the licenses for this type of.
Even if you want a shed in the back of your garden, you're 6 months ahead, I think. But you try to lay out those licenses, and there's a sequence in there. You say first this one and that, etc., etc. Is that the level 1 schedule you are trying to accomplish from 2030, where somebody cuts the ribbon, now we are open all the way back to start of the first license?
Yeah, we had from the beginning, I would say 3 more or less parallel critical paths. So one is related to the licenses, one related to the design of the reactor, and one related to obtaining the area to construct. Yep. Because when we started, there were still old facilities that need to be demolished at the Energy and Health campus. Yep. So that was also a critical path to make sure that the area is timely available to start construction there. And we've maintained those in parallel over time. Okay. And like I said, the licensing has turned out to be a difficult one related to decision making. And you already referred to the situation where we are in now. So we need to have a next decision from the Dutch government to proceed with the project. A lot has happened over the last year. So one of the things is indeed that the private financing has now. Well, the minds have changed on that for several reasons. It's a long story, but anyway, where we are now is that we need to more or less tender again certain parts of the work. So the consortium that was there to design and construct the reactor has fallen apart end of last year. So the construction company left that consortium. So we still have the designer company there. Yep. But especially for the for the civil construction works and for the conventional systems, we are looking for contractors. We started the market consultation to obtain those contracts. Yeah.
Did you have a throwback when you switched from private money to public money? Because with public money comes public compliancy, European tendering rules, etc. Private money is also difficult to get, but you just need the guy with the big big bag of money and say, okay, I want to do this for you, and probably we'll have this for you again. And it's a little bit easier one-on-one to get the financing. Did you have a throwback in your licensing, in your tendering procedures, etc.? Was that a setback for you?
We have a throwback. I think you could say we are now this year basically in the middle of restructuring the project. So end of last year, the consortium fell apart. That has a number of consequences. Firstly, private financing became very difficult. Secondly, we need to rethink how we can obtain the parties that need to can realize the reactor, and thirdly, it's very important that we also in a new structure have to define a new organization. So previously we were set to manage one main contractor, and we had the organization in place to do that. And now we're facing the situation that we will manage a number of contractors, 5 or 6 different contractors, which also puts a very different requirements on our organization. So we're also restructuring our organization and our project controls as well to do that. Yeah,
I think from a project controls perspective, let's zoom in on that. Switching from one contractor to several contractors makes you responsible for interface management. Is that where the complexity comes, for example, from one connection between contractor A and PALLAS into contractor A to E internally and to PALLAS? Is the interface management, because I think it mentioned a couple of times in the market consultation as well, that you don't have all the interfaces clear yet because, well, there was only one interface and now there are 5 times 4 is 20 at least. And if you want to go further in your mathematical, it becomes even more complex. Is that has to be built up from ground?
To a certain extent, yes. Well, and then you say 5 times 5 times 5, but you could also say that a different type of interfaces between the contracts, of course. So the design interfaces. There we still have the designer party, so they will oversee the full design and do the design integration.
That's the Argentinian company who already builds, because I don't know, but I don't think there are 20 designer companies for a nuclear reactor, or is
no, there are only a few, especially for this type of reactors. There are 3 or 4 worldwide who can do that, and one of them is ICOS. ICOS is the consortium name, but INVAP is the Argentine party behind it. That's one of the parties that can do that, and they will do the design integration also going forward. But schedule integration, for instance, that's more our position to do. Then you have, of course, later on at site integration of all the contractors working there. That's also a responsibility that basically ends up with us now. And that's definitely an organization you cannot build up from scratch in only a couple of months. So there we're also looking at professional parties that can support us in doing that can basically put down in a relatively short time a site management organization. And then you have the contracting interfaces, of course, that you need to manage. So and especially on the project schedule interfaces as well as the contract integration, there we need to staff up our organization.
So it's always people, processes, and tools, how we say at the PROCON podcasts. So you need to invest more time into the processes, because there are new processes in place, project management processes, financial processes, but also I think logistic processes. For example, it's not a clean big site where everybody can come in from all the directions. So you said site management is a very difficult or challenging process. Does that give the organization the new energy to get all these new things? Because you're not in the flow anymore. You need to break up, reorganize, restructure. What does that with the people? What does that with your project management organization? Are they getting new energy out of it? So we are going to change this, make it in a success at the end, or is it? How does such an internal process run at PALLAS?
Both are true, actually. So last year, this time, we were in the middle of trying to anticipate a start of the project in terms of realization, detail design, and construction. But then the consortium fell apart. We were in a difficult situation. Also, the government then decided early this year that we need this year basically to restructure the process, the project, and to make sure or to demonstrate that we are capable of realizing this project. So we're now really, and you see that in the team, it took a little bit, it took a while, but you see that the team is really now getting more and more enthusiastic and seeing the structure of the new project coming alive. The idea is that by the end of this year, we can build a convincing package for a decision by the government early next year. And then we are in the position to continue with the project.
Now you have been out to the market. People will be tendering. You're especially looking for local contractors, or at least with local knowledge. It's a European tender, so I think anybody can tender. But the situation in Petten makes it a little bit more challenging than I think the example was in the mountains of Australia. Early next year, you have new tenders on board. Does that give your project management organization the more into their comfort zone than you're managing something which is more predictable? Licenses are very unpredictable. New governments are very, very unpredictable. Does it give it more ease? Is Q1 2022 a relaxing, not a relaxing moment, but going more in a steady flow moment?
That's true. We're really changing the dynamics of the project as a whole. So the whole development phase, the political decision making, the licensing, make it very unpredictable. But as soon as you have to go ahead and really need to start with the project, then it becomes production. And then you can also not afford to have these type of uncertainties, and with that an unpredictability of the project. Because at that moment, so many people are running so fast. So then all hiccups and delays have a big impact.
The training's moving.
So then really the train is moving, and that's a different environment to work in.
Coming back to the project management part a little bit. People, processes, tools. I've been watching the market consultation. I've seen a lot of your organization. We know your organization a little bit. You talk a lot about, it was on one of the slides, the building information management system is with such complex stakeholders like governments, probably economic challenges as well, and people from the nature environment will have an opinion on doing such a thing. There are local residents probably who have something about that. Is one information package available for you as an organization? Is the building information management including environmental, political decisions, etc., or is it just on the building, on the construction, on the things which you can measure? Do you have insight in possible delays, for example, from a governmental decision?
Well, the current information model is really structured about the design information, but you could also the the design of the organization as well is in that environment. That's also very important from a licensing legislation type of view. The regulator also wants to see that you have the capable organization to have such a nuclear license. So also the organizational baseline, how we call it, is an important aspect in that. So and the building information model is really the center of all the information that we use to make sure that all the contractors and basically everyone on the project has access to the latest and most up-to-date information. And in the next phase, especially in the next phase, predictability is probably the most important aspect. So predictability to contractors, predictability of goods coming at site, predictability of the quality that we produce, predictability of the hold and witness points that we that are planned, and being able to involve in time the right parties to do the quality checks. Yeah. And that's very important. And the building information management system is crucial in that predictability.
Yeah. And can you rely on lessons learned? I think there are maybe 10, 15 types of the same types of reactors. Yeah. The regulatory bodies say I need to check the organization as well as the safety, etc. You are building a new team, different. One of my colleagues has been working with you, or is working with you. Said we are on a cultural workshop, so there are a lot of cultural, different cultures in your organization. People who just came into this type of project, because there's no building a house has been done before. Yeah. Building a high flux reactor has been done before, but not as much as houses. Who manages these people? Is that the project director, or is there a specific organizational knowledge in your department for this? Because that looks very, building a new team to do this sounds very challenging.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely not do that on my own.
No.
So building a team is a team effort for, in the end, the whole team. Yeah. And maybe the leaders have a somewhat different responsibility in that. But for sure, it's an effort of the whole team.
Is that something you are inventing as you are doing it? Not inventing, but
inventing,
optimizing.
In the sense that building teams is of all ages, all ages, of course. But we're also using organizations that support us in that. So you can imagine that over the last 1.5 years, it has been very complicated to travel. So we're working with many people from abroad, to Argentina, for 1.5 years, basically through online interaction, which is it's great that it's possible and that it works. Yeah. But of course, you need to be together as well sometimes. So over the last 3-4 weeks, there were some 40 people from Argentina finally be able to come to the Netherlands. So we also had a lot of these type of team building, cultural sessions, really discussing with each other what are the challenges going ahead, how do we organize the teams, how do the teams cooperate with each other, what do we expect from each other, and that is very important to do that type of exercise, to really create this team spirit.
And that's hard to do that through Zoom or whatever.
You can do some, but not to the level that you can do it
face to face. So I'm very happy you're here physically. Okay, so next year the first bricks are going in. What's the anticipated runtime execution phase for the project?
Still quite a while to go. You started the story 2003, and I think you mentioned 2030 already. That's indeed the horizon we're looking at. So next year we can start with site preparation and access roads and fencing of the area, and then the real construction works can start sometime a year later or so. Okay. You mentioned the dune, so we have to build a 20-meter deep construction pit with the foundation in it first, and then from there on we can build the whole installation. So construction time is about 3-4 years. So then we're 2026-7. And then it's about 2 years of commissioning and phasing the production from the HFR, the current HFR, to the PALLAS Reactor, and then we are around 2030 when we are there.
And then another 60 years, or what's the anticipated runtime for this life cycle? That's
what you need to think about. Indeed, you typically build these installations for that type of horizon.
Also to get return on investment in your business case, because it's quite an intensive cost involved on this. And then after, and I know Herman also discussed this last week on the market consultation, then the owner of the current pattern organization, the current high flux reactor, needs to make a decision on what he's doing with that part.
Yeah.
Is there an interface, maybe not a question, is there an interface between the current reactor and the new one? Because, it needs to be operational for, at least 10 years before, or maybe even more before the first capsule comes out of the reactor. Yeah. Is there an interface, or are you learning from that team, for example?
Definitely, yeah. There are many interfaces. First of all, the plot where we built, of course, which is at the Energy and Health campus, so very close to the existing reactor and very close to existing nuclear facility, which is definitely a challenge. There are many interfaces in terms of knowledge, operational knowledge of the reactor, which we try to also absorb in our organization, because it helps a lot to define the design of the new PALLAS Reactor, of course.
Okay.
There are many organizational interfaces. There are not so many, let's say, really hard technical interfaces. A few in terms of the transport of the isotopes.
Yep.
But on other areas, there are many interfaces, and that's also why we are now really taking the steps to become one organization together with NRG, the operator of the HFR, so that also the organizations are largely integrated. Yeah, because you are taking over their clients at the end, so not their production, but their clients, and they need the production site, and then the new PALLAS Reactor is the main production site for those people. Yeah. They only have to move 300 meters with their van. Yeah, the commercial interface is a very important one. I think we're now about the time that new contracts will be with clients will be become in place that go over the horizon of the HFR and go into the operational lifetime of the PALLAS Reactor. So,
because a typical contract is that long?
It's about can be about 10 years.
Okay.
That's starting to happen.
Yeah.
Now.
So you also need to think. So in your schedule, there's also the operational part you need to think about, because you are going to sign a contract with somebody who says, okay, the first 8 years comes out of the energy and the other 2 are coming out of your new reactor. And there is a hard deadline that you're open for business in that case, that you are capable of handling all those equipments, etc., etc. Is that a separate organization? Because the definition of a project is it has a start, it has a finish. At some time you're completely finished with the project, lessons learned, etc. But at the meantime, you need to build the operational. Are there already operational people in a new organization ready?
Yeah, so the beginning of that organization is there. So that's why we also say we have the PALLAS program.
Yeah.
And below the PALLAS program is the reactor project, which is my responsibility. But there's also a operational readiness project. So that's basically a project that need to build the whole operational organization. So by the time the asset is ready to be run, that indeed there is a capable organization to do that, which is also quite a challenge to train nuclear operators and to make sure that they have the right qualifications.
There's no book.
No, it's not an easy thing. And next to that, we also have what we call the Nuclear Health Center project, which is a new facility that is doing what I described earlier, the next step in the processing. So take irradiated samples and produce out of that a solution with the isotope dissolved, but then for other type of isotopes that are currently not yet at the site. Okay. And that's also a dedicated project under the PALLAS program.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Does the operational organization have a say in your requirements? What we in engineering, you sometimes see that the maintenance people have a say in the engineering. Mm-hmm. Why? Because if they engineer it different, it's easier to maintain. Mm-hmm. Does it apply to your organization as well? Do the operational guys and girls have something to say, or have an opinion on what you're building? To say, well, why don't you do it like this? Or
we try to use that knowledge in the organization as good as we can, and then it's really the requirements to operate. So dedicated to, for instance, handling of radioactive waste, which they have a lot of experience within the NRG organization.
Yep.
And we design the systems to do that together with these operators, or handling radioactive targets in hot cells. And there also we look at their capabilities.
Yep.
They have, with energy, a lot of experience in what we call the irradiation rigs. So these are really dedicated instruments, you can say, that hold the samples that go in the reactor for irradiation, and that we design together with them. Maybe not so much the big hardware, but really the dedicated systems. We involve the
which is specific for to nuclear.
Yeah.
Does that? I know a little bit about physics. Is it so different to handle nuclear stuff on terms of a temperature, or is the iteration damaging things? What's the difficult from hardware perspective?
The difficult is in the end the radioactivity, the radioactive radiation that comes from it. So if you can, most of the targets are around grams when they come in for irradiation, and they're tons when they go out, because of the shielding around it. So you can imagine the logistic process. If things come in and you can carry a box with a lot of these targets, but when they're irradiated, they really have to go to hot cell operations and go into heavy containers of sometimes tons. Indeed, that needs to be then logistically moved through the buildings and out of the facility. And you can imagine that the whole security around the facility is also a very important aspect, which also makes the logistics even more complicated sometimes.
And security on safety. I think you have a site who is capable of handling a plane crash. You also next to the airport, but also from a safety or security or you don't want somebody to run out with a box of irradiated things. I've been in Urenco where they do the uranium. I've been there one time. It took me like an hour to get in just to have a meeting. I can assume it's different when you actually need to work there day in, day out from a safety point of view.
It's different indeed, but you still need to go basically to the same scans and checks. To make sure that there are no threats from outside that can have an impact on what's happening inside. You never want to be in the news, of course, that these type of things happen. So there are a lot of measures, visible and invisible, that should prevent that.
One thing which triggered my mind last week when I was preparing is the PALLAS Reactor wants to be capable of handling new. They didn't say invention, but new type of isotopes. How hard is it to prepare for something you don't know? Is the difference in the isotope? Is the handling the same, or are you anticipating extensions or replacements of hardware? How can you prepare for something you don't know yet?
There's a lot of flexibility already in the current design. Flexibility. In terms that the design is such that there are quite a few irradiation positions, that's how we call them, with different neutron flux levels. In the end, it's the neutron flux that does the job, so to speak. And there's a lot of flexibility in maneuvering around this core, and also in handling the irradiated targets that comes out. So that flexibility should enable that we are capable to produce this variety of isotopes. There's a lot of knowledge in the NRG organization on all the type of isotopes you can imagine. And we did also a lot of studies to see what the capability of the reactor are as it's designed now to produce those isotopes. So we know that whatever the developments are, we are in a good position to be able to deal with that.
Because how sadly it is, the demand for these isotopes is growing.
That's what we see, and indeed you're right. The reason behind that is of course is of course a sad reason that a lot of people need to be treated with it. But on the other hand, if we can contribute to a good treatment of these patients, that's very rewarding, of course.
Well, you're really working for a good cause at the end, but everybody would would like to have you going out of business very soon. That's the same with ammunition suppliers, etc. Everybody wants them out of business, but let's control it in a safe way. What's the biggest we think project controls as a profession. In your opinion, you have been a project manager. I've looked at your resume. Everything says project and engineering probably in your resume for the last years. What's the biggest experience, or what if you have to tell one thing from the last 5 years, what's the nicest or the best or the what beats your heart a little bit faster if you're looking at this project? Because we say a project is a project. That's not true, but we say a project is a project to manage. But something is different in this project. What makes the smile on your face?
Yeah, it's a very unique and very challenging project. Like you said, the cause why we're doing that is, of course, very rewarding. That's also what you see in the organization that makes the hearts of the people beat a bit faster if they see why they do it in the end. And I think the best experience, or what is the I think what we're starting to see now, the vibe that we're starting to see now with the growing organization, with pieces, seeing that pieces are falling together, and that we are in an increasingly better shape to manage this project, and that we see that the things are falling together, and that we the confidence is growing that we are indeed going to be this predictable project and predictable organization as far as possible. Of course, there will always be
tomorrow there's
surprises,
a change.
But then at least you need to be predictable in how you handle those surprises.
You are capable of handling those changes before they become issues, for example. Okay. Jan, I told you this morning, it's early, it's starting to get light outside. Probably we have to come to a moment where I say, well, I want to learn more on how big is the reactor, etc. But we are already 45 minutes talking. We need to cut this off. We are going to talk about it a little bit later. Maybe when it's opening, I'm going to invite myself back to do the next episode. Thank you very much for the real insights in how to build a nuclear reactor. Thank you very much for your contribution. And listeners, thank you very much for keeping up with us again. This educational track for scheduled in 2 weeks. The software specials are coming still. And thank you very much, Jan van der Marel from the PALLAS Reactor, for the use case for this week. If you want to learn more on project controls, please subscribe to proconpodcast.com. You can listen and watch this episode over there, but also on Spotify, Apple, and Google, and whatever you prefer. Please subscribe, please tune in, and see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. Jan, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here. That was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting proconpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to Premoned. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.